Hi everyone, hope you're well. Today I'd like to talk about pagan values, and I did a whole chapter on pagan values in my book Dark Mirror, the Inner Work of Witchcraft, and there's a whole section about putting pagan values into practice in the world in The Night Journey, Witchcraft as Transformation. And first of all, I want to start with the basis for the pagan worldview. So, to my mind, the basis of the pagan worldview is that living in the world is a good thing, that nature is good, the earth is good, and that we are part of nature. And so, I think that the whole of the pagan values and the worldview really spring from that core idea. And I think that that was true for ancient pagans as well as for contemporary pagans and other earth-focused religions, such as indigenous religions. However, I don't want to speak for indigenous religions because it's not my place, but I do think that there's a shared value there. I saw a story recently about how indigenous people were making offerings to a lake spirit, and they were doing that as a gesture of reciprocity and connection with the lake spirit, and this was misinterpreted as a propitiatory sacrifice. So it made me wonder if the sacrifices or offerings that were made to nature, so places in nature in ancient times, ancient pagan religions, were also not propitiatory necessarily, but as a way of maintaining and establishing a relationship. Just a thought. I think that one of the core values in paganism is establishing relationships with nature, with the seasons, and with the world around us, with other beings in the world. This would include other animals, with trees, places, the various spirits that inhabit nature. And the way to establish that relationship is through the practice of reciprocity. So there's a folk saying that when you take something from a tree, like a branch or a twig or a fruit, you say, "O tree, give me of your wood, and I will give you mine when I become a tree." So it's this notion of you're giving me something, so I'm giving you something back. And I've talked about reciprocity quite a bit in my stuff I've written, again in the books and in various blog posts on the subject. Because reciprocity is a really important pagan value. And another one that's really important is the idea of hospitality. This is something that's embedded in a lot of ancient cultures from around the world. It's not purely a pagan value, but it is really important. And we have to remember that hospitality is also a reciprocal thing, because the host has certain obligations to, once the guest has been accepted as a guest, they have to, feed them and entertain them and stuff, and give them a comfortable bed to sleep in. And the guest has certain responsibilities, and one of those is not to eat their host out of house and home, and to move on at some point, because hospitality is not infinite. And it's worth noting that the word guest and the word host come from the same root and essentially mean the same thing. And that really emphasises the reciprocal nature of hospitality. Most contemporary pagan traditions have a list of values or virtues, and this stems from the ancient pagan practice of virtue ethics. And the idea of virtue ethics was that you cultivate the virtues. So rather than saying, right, we're just going to have a list of thou shalt nots, instead it was about cultivating positive virtues like kindness and hospitality and reciprocity and honour and various different things. And if you go to the I think it's the Religio Romana website, I think it's Nova Roma, they've got a huge list of Roman virtues on there. Most modern heathen traditions have a list of virtues that they celebrate, and there are also 8 virtues in Wicca, and these are nicely balanced because they are honour and humility, mirth and reverence, strength and compassion, power and compassion, and strength and beauty. And I go into these in more detail again in Dark Mirror here, so check it out. So I think also another really important concept in paganism and pagan values and the pagan worldview is the idea of a common treasury for all, which is basically the idea that land is held in common, and that really you can't own land, because you have to think about the fact that land is a finite resource. The continents are not going to expand. In fact, they're going to shrink because the oceans will be rising because of climate change. And the fact that huge swathes of the earth are owned by a very tiny handful of people is an obscene travesty, because we all live on the earth, we all have to eat, and so the value of the earth being communally owned by all of its inhabitants, not just humans, I mean animals and birds and trees and ecosystems as well. And an encouraging development in this area is that there has been a move to make rivers count as legal beings in their own right, which is a good thing. And we need to think more in terms of ecosystems, and also remember that Indigenous people, that 80% of the biodiversity on Earth is in areas managed and cared for by Indigenous peoples. So Indigenous people are absolutely key to maintaining biodiversity. And if you don't believe me, that's from a UN report. And if you Google Indigenous people 80% biodiversity, you can find numerous references. So that's an important thing. I mean, Indigenous people should be given back their land as a matter of principle, but that's a really good pragmatic reason to do it. And all this talk of having a third of the land base on Earth being given over to wildlife, that plan should absolutely include Indigenous people being able to manage that land and own that land, because they know how to take care of it, because they've been doing that for millennia. Anyway, so yeah, the whole ecological relationship with nature is obviously a really important part of paganism. And I think it's worth noting that being in right relationship with nature and with the spirits of nature and with other animals in nature is really, really important. I don't know how much evidence there is that ancient pagan peoples thanked the animals that they had killed in the hunt, but I'm pretty sure they did. And certainly Indigenous people do that, and I can't see why our ancient pagan ancestors would have been any different in that regard. So, thanking the earth and the animals for the gift of life is really important. And obviously not taking more than you need, and acting in a sustainable way. So if you go out to gather fruit or go foraging or go hunting or whatever it is, there's always a principle of not taking more than you need and only taking your fair share, and making sure that everybody in the community is fed. And I also think that paganism would have valued diversity, for the simple reason that if you have a tribe of people that tribe is going to want to have all the various skills available. So you would need your village blacksmith, you would need your, when pottery has been invented, you would need your potter. You need people who can farm, you need people who can weave, you need people who can sew, and the hunting and gathering part is also really important. So I think that ancient paganism definitely respected diversity, and we do know from records that the ancient pagans were affirming of gender variance and gender nonconformity and same-sex relationships. So they had different concepts around those things, but they were affirming of those relationships. So there is no place for homophobia in contemporary paganism or transphobia. When you look at the number of gender diverse deities that there are and gender variant deities, there is absolutely no place for transphobia in contemporary paganism. So if you're that way inclined, cut it out, please. Thank you. Anyway, I think this video is quite long enough, so I will say have a nice day, blessed be, take care of yourselves, and see you next time.